It was 3:07 a.m. when the shattering of glass jolted Sarah awake. Her heart pounding as she realized someone was inside her home. She grabbed her phone, her hands trembling, and dialed 911, whispering urgently about an intruder. Down the hall, her 12-year-old son, Ethan, stirred, clutching the .22 rifle his late father had taught him to use for target practice, never imagining he'd aim it at a man claiming to be an HOA officer who had no business being there. Sarah had lived in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek for 6 years. It was a place where kids rode bikes until dusk, neighbors waved from porches, and the biggest drama was usually about whose lawn needed trimming. The HOA, run by a small group of overly meticulous residents, sent out newsletters about mailbox uniformity and hedge heights, but Sarah never paid much attention. She kept her yard neat, paid her dues, and stayed out of their meetings. Her life revolved around Ethan, her only child, and keeping their small 2-bedroom home a safe haven after her husband, Mark, passed away 3 years earlier from a sudden heart attack. That night, Sarah had gone to bed early, exhausted from a double shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Ethan had stayed up late, playing video games in his room, the glow of the screen casting shadows on his walls. The house was still, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. Sarah had always felt safe in Willow Creek, with its cul-de-sacs and friendly faces. The idea of someone breaking in seemed unthinkable, until it happened. The sound of breaking glass came from the living room. Sarah's eyes snapped open, her body rigid under the covers. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, her fingers fumbling as she unlocked it. The clock read 3:07 a.m. She held her breath, listening. A step. Heavy, deliberate, moving through the house. Her stomach twisted as she dialed 911. Her voice barely a whisper as she told the operator someone was inside. "Stay calm, ma'am," the operator said. "Officers are on their way. Stay where you are." Sarah's mind raced. Ethan. He was alone in his room, just down the hall. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet cold against the floor, and grabbed the baseball bat she kept in the corner, a relic from Mark's coaching days. She crept toward the door, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure the intruder could hear it. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a low voice muttering something she couldn't make out. Then a louder sound, a drawer being yanked open, papers rustling. Whoever it was, they weren't just passing through. In his room, Ethan was already awake. The sound of the glass had startled him, pulling him away from his game. He froze, his headset still on, the faint sounds of his friends' voices chattering through it. He muted the mic and listened. The house wasn't right. He slid off his chair, his bare feet silent on the carpet, and reached under his bed for the .22 rifle his dad had given him. Mark had been strict about gun safety, drilling into Ethan the importance of treating the rifle with respect. They'd spent weekends at the range, shooting at paper targets, Mark's steady hand guiding Ethan's aim. "Only for protection or practice," Mark had said. "Never point it at anyone unless you have no choice." Ethan's hands shook as he loaded the rifle, just like his dad had taught him. He could hear the man now, moving through the living room, muttering. Ethan cracked his door open, peering into the dark hallway. The faint glow from the streetlight outside spilled through the broken window, casting jagged shadows. He saw a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket with some kind of logo on it. The man was rifling through the desk in the living room, pulling out papers, tossing them aside. Ethan's stomach churned. This wasn't a random thief. The man was looking for something. Sarah reached Ethan's door, her bat gripped tightly. She saw him standing there, the rifle in his hands, his eyes wide but focused. "Ethan," she hissed, her voice barely audible. "Get back." He shook his head, his jaw set. "He's in the living room," Ethan whispered. "He's looking for something." Sarah's heart sank. She wanted to pull Ethan behind her to shield him, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He was scared, but he wasn't backing down. The man in the living room straightened up, holding a stack of papers. He turned, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, and Sarah caught a glimpse of his jacket. It had a patch on it, one she recognized. The Willow Creek HOA logo, a stylized tree with the neighborhood's initials. Her mind reeled. Dito. At 3 a.m. She'd never heard of them doing anything like this. The man's voice carried, low and irritated. "It's gotta be here somewhere," he muttered, moving toward the hallway. Sarah pushed Ethan back into his room, her hand on his shoulder. "Stay here," she whispered. "Don't do anything unless I say." Ethan nodded, but his grip on the rifle tightened. Sarah stepped into the hallway, the bat raised, her phone still clutched in her other hand. The 911 operator was still on the line, asking questions, but Sarah couldn't focus on the words. The man was coming closer, his flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, her voice cracking. The beam swung toward her, blinding her for a moment. The man froze, then spoke, his voice calm but authoritative. "Ma'am, I'm with the Willow Creek HOA. We've had reports of violations on this property. I need to inspect the premises." Sarah's grip on the bat tightened. "At 3 in the morning, she snapped. "You broke into my house." The man stepped closer, his face still in shadow. "Ma'am, this is standard procedure for non-compliant residents. Hand over any documents related to your property taxes and HOA agreements." Sarah's mind raced. She'd never missed a payment, never received a violation notice. This didn't add up. "Get out," she said, her voice steady now. "The police are on their way." The man's tone shifted, growing sharper. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." He took another step, and Sarah raised the bat higher. Behind her, she heard Ethan's door creak. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling but firm. The man's head snapped toward the sound, and his flashlight beam landed on Ethan, who stood in the doorway, the rifle aimed at the intruder. "Kid, put that down," the man said, his voice low, almost a growl. Ethan didn't move. His hands were steady, the rifle pointed at the man's chest. Sarah's heart stopped. "Ethan, no," she said, her voice shaking. But Ethan's eyes were locked on the man. "You're not HOA," Ethan said. "I've seen the HOA guys. They don't break into houses." The man laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Smart kid. Too smart." He took a step toward Ethan, and Sarah lunged forward, swinging the bat. The man dodged, grabbing her arm and twisting it until the bat clattered to the floor. Sarah cried out, struggling against his grip. Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. "Let her go," he shouted, his finger tightening on the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the small hallway. The man staggered back, clutching his shoulder, his flashlight dropping to the floor. Sarah broke free, scrambling to Ethan's side. The man cursed, his voice thick with pain, and stumbled toward the living room. Sarah grabbed Ethan, pulling him back into his room and slamming the door shut. "Stay here," she said, her voice trembling. She grabbed her phone, still connected to the 911 operator. "He's shot," she said. "The intruder's shot. Hurry." Outside, sirens wailed, growing closer. The man's footsteps thudded through the house, then stopped. Sarah heard the front door slam open, then silence. She held Ethan tightly, his body shaking against hers. The rifle was still in his hands, his knuckles white. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. He was hurting you." Sarah stroked his hair, tears streaming down her face. "It's okay," she said. "You protected us." The police arrived minutes later, their flashlights sweeping through the house. They found blood in the hallway and living room, trailing out the front door, but the man was gone. The broken window in the living room was the point of entry, the glass scattered across the carpet. The papers the man had been rifling through were Sarah's mortgage documents and HOA records, now strewn across the desk. The officers took statements, their faces grim as Sarah recounted the night. Ethan sat on the couch, the rifle confiscated for evidence, his eyes distant. The investigation unfolded over the next few days. The police confirmed the man wasn't affiliated with the Willow Creek HOA. The jacket he wore was a convincing replica, but the HOA president, a fussy older man named Gerald, insisted they'd never authorized any inspections, let alone at 3 a.m. The blood trail led to a nearby street, where tire marks suggested the man had fled in a vehicle. The police suspected he was part of a larger scam targeting homeowners, posing as HOA officials to gain access to homes and steal personal information or valuables. Sarah and Ethan stayed with her sister for a week while the police processed the scene. The neighborhood buzzed with rumors, neighbors stopping by with casseroles and questions. Some praised Ethan's bravery. Others whispered about the dangers of a 12-year-old with a gun. Sarah struggled with the weight of it all. She'd never wanted Ethan to face something like this, to carry the burden of pulling that trigger. But she couldn't deny he'd saved them. The man had been armed. She learned later from the police that they'd found a knife dropped in the living room, its blade gleaming in the evidence photos. Ethan was quiet in the days that followed. He didn't want to talk about the rifle or the man or the sound of the gunshot. Sarah took him to a counselor, hoping to help him process what had happened. The counselor said Ethan was strong but needed time. Sarah watched him closely, her heart breaking every time she saw him flinch at a loud noise or stare out the window, lost in thought. The police eventually identified a suspect, a man named Victor Hayes, known for running scams across several states. He'd been spotted in a nearby town, his shoulder bandaged, but he slipped through their grasp. The case remained open, the police assuring Sarah they'd catch him. She installed a security system, replaced the broken window, and started attending HOA meetings, determined to keep an eye on things. The neighbors rallied around her, some offering to start a neighborhood watch. Sarah and Ethan returned home, but the house felt different. The safety Sarah had once taken for granted was gone, replaced by a hyper-awareness of every creak and shadow. She kept the baseball bat by her bed, though she knew it wouldn't erase the fear. Ethan stopped playing video games late at night, his headset gathering dust on his desk. Instead, he spent hours sketching, drawing scenes of the neighborhood, quiet streets, neat lawns, and sometimes a shadowy figure in a jacket. Months passed, and the police updates grew less frequent. Sarah focused on rebuilding a sense of normalcy for Ethan. They went to the park, baked cookies, watched old movies. But the memory of that night lingered, a weight they both carried. Sarah often thought about what Ethan had said to the intruder. "You're not HOA." He'd seen through the lie, acted when she couldn't. She was proud of him, but it hurt to know he'd had to grow up so fast. One evening, as Sarah tucked Ethan into bed, he looked at her, his eyes serious. "Mom, do you think he'll come back?" Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to say no, to promise he'd never have to face that fear again. But she couldn't lie. "If he does," she said, "we'll be ready. Together." Ethan nodded, his hand reaching for hers. For the first time in weeks, he smiled, a small, tentative thing, but enough to give Sarah hope. The story of that night spread beyond Willow Creek, picked up by local news, then national outlets. Reporters called, asking for interviews, but Sarah turned them down. She didn't want Ethan's face on TV, didn't want their trauma turned into a headline. Fake HOA officer shot by 12-year-old was sensational enough without their voices adding to it. She wanted to protect Ethan's privacy, to let him heal without the world watching. The neighborhood changed too. The HOA implemented stricter protocols, requiring all representatives to carry photo IDs and banning unannounced visits. Residents started locking their doors, checking their windows. Sarah found herself part of a tighter community, bound by a shared sense of vulnerability. She and Ethan weren't alone anymore, but the cost of that connection was a night neither would forget. Sarah still wakes sometimes at 3:07 a.m., her heart racing, listening for footsteps that aren't there. Ethan keeps the sketches he drew, tucked away in a drawer, a reminder of the night he became more than a kid. They're moving forward one day at a time, in a world that feels a little less safe but a lot more real.